Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. All right, let's just dive right into it. Getting ready for your first big 80-mark microeconomics and business economics paper? Yeah, it can feel, well, completely overwhelming. You're suddenly getting hit with this massive wall of jargon, all these formulas and graphs that seem to shift in literally every direction. But listen, I'm here to tell you, we are going to crack this together.
So, let's take a breath for a second. Honestly ask yourself, how are you feeling about this upcoming assessment? If the answer is kinda anxious, please know that is completely, totally normal. The secret to tackling an 80-mark economics paper without panicking, it's really not about being some math genius or, memorizing a massive textbook word for word. It's all about having the exact right tools in your toolkit and actually understanding what the mark scheme is asking you to do.
To get you feeling fully prepared, here is our game plan for today. First, ace your first economics exam. Then, nailing the key definitions. Next, cracking consumer behavior MCQs. Followed by calculating costs with confidence, mastering market diagrams, and finally, exam strategy and time management.
All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, Nailing the Key Definitions. Quick recall for easy marks.
Okay, so the very first tool in our toolkit is memorizing those foundational definitions exactly as the examiner wants to see them. Let's look at productivity. If they ask what is meant by the term productivity, to get your full 2 marks, you need to state this. It is the amount of output produced in relation to the resources used or the time period. So the absolute crucial takeaway here is that it's simply a measurement. It's just comparing how much you're getting out versus how much effort, time, or resources you're actually putting in. You definitely want to memorize this phrasing exactly.
Next up, let's talk about social costs. Now, this one usually pops up as a quick 1-mark question. The set formula for social costs is just private costs plus external costs. This really highlights how economics relies so heavily on simple equations. By committing this specific formula to memory, you're securing this super quick point on the exam without having to write out some massive lengthy paragraph. Easy, right?
And rounding out our key definitions, we've got total costs. So what is meant by the term total costs? Again, it's just a really simple addition formula. Total fixed costs plus total variable costs. Honestly, getting this definition completely locked in your head right now is vital. Why? Because, as we're going to see in just a few minutes, this simple little addition is the absolute foundation for the calculation questions you are inevitably going to have to tackle.
Moving right along to Section 2, cracking consumer behavior MCQs, understanding the economic logic.
Now, what's super interesting here is that this addresses a trap that so many beginners fall right into. Just imagine a question tells you that a firm increases its prices and suddenly consumers stop buying the products. Why did they stop? Well, the answer, straight from the source paper, is that consumers aim to maximize benefits. A huge pitfall is confusing consumers with firms, right? Firms usually aim to maximize profit. Consumers, on the other hand, are entirely focused on maximizing their own benefits. They're always calculating what gives them the absolute most value for their money.
And that logic perfectly leads us into identifying different types of goods. Let's say you get a multiple choice question where a product has an income elasticity of demand, or YED, of minus 0.9. What kind of good even is this? Well, to figure it out, you just compare the values. On the left side, normal and luxury goods always have a positive YED value. Basically, when your income goes up, you buy more of them. But on the right side, inferior goods have a negative YED value. Because our value is minus 0.9, it's an inferior good. This just means when consumer income rises, they actually buy less of this product, probably because they're switching to a higher quality alternative.
Okay, time for Section 3, calculating costs with confidence. Always show you're working. Let's look at a real, actual sample exam scenario testing that definition of total costs we learned just a second ago. Here's the setup. A firm has total fixed costs of 37,000 euros per month and variable costs of 170 euros per unit. They produce 650 units per month. Now, calculate the total cost per month for the firm. The absolute golden rule for the exam here, you are strongly advised to show you're working out.
So, let's break down the exact step-by-step calculation method to basically guarantee you get those 2 marks. Step 1, just write down your formula. Total costs equal fixed costs plus variable costs. Step 2, calculate that total variable cost. So you multiply the 170 euro variable cost by the 650 units produced. Bam! That gives you 110,500 euros. Finally, step 3, just add your fixed costs. 37,000 euros plus 110,500 euros equals 147,500 euros. Now here's why this is so crucial. If you just write down 147,500 euros, sure, you might get the marks. But what if you make a tiny little calculator error and just write the wrong final number? You get 0, nothing. By writing out the steps exactly like this, you actually secure a mark for showing the correct calculation method, even if your final addition is slightly off.
All right, Section 4, Mastering Market Diagrams, Visualizing Shifts in Supply and Demand.
Look, for a lot of beginners, market graphs are definitely the most visually intimidating part of economics. But let's completely demystify them. Just look at this standard diagram for the market for cars. Before you even think about shifting any lines around, just look at the axis labels. You've got price on the vertical axis and quantity on the horizontal axis. You have your demand curve sloping down and your supply curve sloping up. Right where they cross, that's your original equilibrium price, labeled PE, and equilibrium quantity, labeled QE. You should always ground yourself in these basics first.
Okay, let's quickly summarize the core rules for actually shifting those curves. First, think about production. If there's a sudden rise in the cost of raw materials, it's instantly harder and more expensive to produce goods. That means supply shifts to the left. Now, think about the consumer side. If a substitute good suddenly becomes unavailable or way too expensive, consumers are going to flock to your product instead. That means demand shifts to the right. And the final rule to remember? Always explicitly label your new equilibrium price with a P1 and your new quantity with a Q1.
So, let's see what that actually looks like in action. In this source example, Amazon Prime ends its streaming service. Right away, that is a missing substitute good. Because customers still want to maximize their benefit, they demand tennis TV subscriptions instead. Just look at the graph here. The demand curve shifts to the right from D to D1. Following our rules, we find the new intersection with the supply line. We draw a dotted line over to the price axis and label it P1, showing that the price increased. Then, we draw a dotted line down to the quantity axis and label it Q1, showing the quantity demanded increased too. That is 3 clear marks secured, just by following the visual rules. It's literally like a puzzle.
Almost there. Section 5, Exam Strategy and Time Management, Pacing Your 80-mark paper. You know, a lot of students actually know the material perfectly, but they just run out of time before the final bell. So let's break down the math of the exam clock. You have an 80-mark paper, and you're given 1 hour and 30 minutes to finish it. That is exactly 90 minutes total. I highly advise you to pace yourself at roughly 1 minute per mark. A 2-mark definition? Take 2 minutes. A 3-mark diagram? Give it 3 minutes. Sticking strictly to this pace strategically leaves you with a fantastic 10-minute buffer at the very end of the exam to go back, check your math, and review your written answers.
So, what should you take away from all this? Honestly, you absolutely have the tools you need. Just remember to learn your definitions verbatim, always show you're working step by step for the math questions, label your diagram axes super clearly, and definitely stick to your 1 minute per mark timing. Trust your preparation, walk into that exam room with total confidence, and you are for sure going to ace it. But remember, economics isn't just about passing a test. It's literally the hidden language of human decision-making. Once you start seeing the whole world in terms of supply, demand, and maximized benefits, what everyday mysteries will you uncover next? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and happy studying.